Investigations editor for the New York Times, author of the new book, Murder the Truth, Fear, the First Amendment, and a Secret Campaign to Protect the Powerful. David Enrich joins the table. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
There's a book I'm reading right now, really listening to. I only really listen to books, called Murder the Truth by David Enrich. I have a particular interest in this book because this really goes to the heart of why communication strategy is so interesting and intricate and important right now, really crisis communications strategy. Because we live in a world that I would refer to actually as the golden age of defamation. Because of Section 230, and because of the fact that you can sort of say anything on a media platform and defame somebody and really destroy their lives and get away with it because there's nobody liable in the chain that you can sue to get the damages, what you were damaged back. That's just the way it is. And interestingly enough, this book is covering a world where billionaires are, according to the thesis of this book by David Enrich, billionaires are suing media organizations to get them to shut up about various pieces of criticism, about corporations, people who are rich, etc., and so on. I have a completely different take on this because I've worked for people who have been defamed, and and particularly in the Me Too era, what I have witnessed is things getting published that could not possibly be proven as true. I've also would say alongside that the media has now taken on this idea, this sort of persona of advocacy, rather than following the facts of a story and letting the facts lead the story in the tradition of Ben Bradley. And so you see a lot of pieces where things are published, again, that could not possibly be proven as true, either because they happened a very long time ago or because the two participants involved are saying completely opposite things.
And so it's basically an effort to make it easier for people like that to sue journalists and members of the public who criticize them, investigate them, scrutinize them. And that it poses a real threat, I think, to the ability of journalists and members of the public to really understand what's happening in their country and even in their communities.
I am going to listen to this book and give it fair hearing. And full disclosure, David Enrich did contact one of my friends who is the former Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Justin Fairfax, for this book. I shouldn't say contact. He reached out to Lieutenant Governor Fairfax. They never actually spoke. Actually, David Enrich and I actually ended up talking, emailing back and forth. But, from our perspective, it was like another pointy-headed exercise about the First Amendment and Time Sullivan. And when somebody's life has been destroyed, it is not a pointy-headed exercise. There's a real human being behind that. And it's just really hard to get these journalists to understand that. I don't know if he's mentioned it or not, but I haven't gotten through much of the book. I've got like 7 hours to listen to. So I'm not done with the book, and I'll give it fair reading. But he was, talking to David Enrich. It was a very interesting discussion that I had with him. I'm glad he reached out as opposed to not reaching out, which is what a lot of people do. They don't really want to hear the opposite side of some of the things and some of the theses they have about certain things. He at least did that. I don't trust the New York Times at all when it comes to the question of Me Too stories. They only really report in one direction, and that is the direction of the man is always guilty and the woman is always innocent. And I'm talking about their reporting side, to be clear, not their editorial side. Their editorial side has actually there have been some op-eds in the New York Times that have criticized the Me Too movement. But on the reporting side, all of the reporting has gone in one direction. So it's kind of like you can kind of tell what the advocacy position of the New York Times is on that particular subject matter. And I think that's playing a role in this. But the thesis of the book is that Time Sullivan is that there's this, rich cabal that's going to bring down Time Sullivan. And I get that. And what I think is going to be completely missing, but I can't judge yet because I have not listened to the entire book, is the part where journalists get a story wrong and destroy somebody's life. Journalists get a story incomplete, don't completely report all the facts, leave out the facts that are inconvenient to the narrative that they want, and then destroy somebody's life and reputation. That is what I have witnessed. and I've witnessed it a few times. And what I'm telling you is nobody cares once that thing is published, once once that genie is out of the bottle, no one wants to go back and admit, wow, we might have been wrong. Nobody wants to do that. By the way, we're seeing that right now in real time in the case of Jay-Z versus this person, this Jane Doe accuser brought forward by Tony Busby. So this happens in real life. Jay-Z, of course, is a billionaire. He can afford to at least defend himself. But him being a billionaire didn't change the fact that what would appear now to be a completely false story went around the world. And to say it was defamatory would be an understatement. And when you bring these things up to people who argue in favor of keeping Time Sullivan around, their attitude seems to be to shrug their shoulders and say, well, but we need freedom of the press, so if a few people get destroyed, no big deal. That seems to be their thing. That seems to be their reaction. I can't accept that. And I particularly can't accept that in a country that has a particular penchant and habit to defame black males in particular on specific subject matter, particularly dealing with sexual violence. So no, that ain't cool at all. Not to say it's a picnic for our white counterparts, because it's not, as we saw with Andrew Cuomo, who does appear to be making a comeback. But my point is, Time Sullivan shouldn't be the big worry for journalists, or not having Time Sullivan. The big worry for journalists should be to get the story accurate, to get the facts of the story accurate. And stop worrying about getting sued for defamation. The way that you prevent getting sued for defamation is you get the story right. If you get the story right, you have to worry about defamation. So I'm going to read this book, or I should say listen to this book. I'm going to give it fair hearing, but I'm suspicious because already I'm up to the point where they're talking about the Hulk Hogan Gawker case. Well, Gawker deserved to get sued for that. You put somebody's sex tape on a website, Hulk Hogan is not an elected official. We didn't need to know that information. That wasn't vital to anything. They just did that for web traffic and money. That's what that's done for. So I'm a little bit suspicious, but again, David Enrich did at least reach out. We did have a very interesting intellectual discussion about these things. I just think that a lot of these journalists, frankly, they spend their entire life in a newsroom, and they do not understand what it is to be in the real world of politics and business, where people will do anything to destroy somebody or get them out of the way. They don't understand what that is. Because when you are not the man or woman in the arena, you don't see that vantage point as much, or at all if you're a journalist. So I've been both now. See, I've worked for politicians and worked in the political realm and worked in journalism at USA Today and ABC News. And I'm telling you, a lot of these journalists don't understand. And by the way, some of this video has some clips from Taylor Lorenz, who did just interview, or I should say just dropped the video today of David Enrich. And Taylor Lorenz it's an interesting, I sort of have a love-hate thing with Taylor Lorenz. She brings up some really good topics that are really, really vital for the conversation that we have today about the digital and technological age that we live in. At the same time, I disagree with a lot of the stories that she has put out on certain people that she seems to have targeted, really. And then everybody gets surprised when they get sued for defamation. It's like, really? I mean, you targeted this person, you damaged their reputation, and then you're getting surprised that they're suing? I mean, put yourself in their position. What would you be doing? And there is no recourse for an elected official who has to prove malice in court. There just isn't. So nobody's won a libel suit that I know of against the New York Times in 50 years. So what are you talking about? But again, I'm still listening to the book, and I'll have another analysis later. I want to do a shout out to the late now Congressman Raul Grijalva, who I've talked to many times. One of the best interviews in Congress, one of the best interviews in politics, one of the most interesting interviews people to talk to in politics. And may he rest in peace. He was a progressive champion, a very interesting person, very candid person, no nonsense. And that type of individual should always be missed in our politics, whether they be Democrat or Republican. This is Lauren Burke. I I talk about defamation, crisis management, communication strategy as it pertains to politics, sometimes celebrities, and all sorts of stuff like that. I'll be back soon.